Mr. Carlos, 80 years old, was once a proud and strong father, deeply connected to everything he had built in his life. His greatest pride was the family cafe he ran with his late wife, Maria, a small but vibrant place that wasn't just a business. It was the beating heart of their family and their community. Casa de Amor was more than just a cafe. It was a sanctuary where they celebrated life's milestones, shared laughter, and created memories that lasted a lifetime. But life has a way of taking away the things we hold most dear. A series of misfortunes left Carlos devastated. First, Maria passed away after a long illness, leaving him with an empty heart and an even emptier home. Shortly after, due to financial struggles, the cafe was shut down, and the property was sold to make way for a soulless shopping mall. Carlos watched helplessly as the place that held decades of memories was reduced to rubble. With nowhere else to go, Carlos moved in with his only son, Miguel, in a small house on the outskirts of the city. While Miguel provided everything Carlos needed, shelter, food, and care, there was one thing he couldn't seem to give: time. Miguel was always busy with work, and their conversations were short and impersonal. Carlos, who had once been surrounded by people and purpose, now found himself sitting alone most days, staring out the window and wondering what his life had become. As he sat in his small room, his thoughts often drifted back to Casa de Amor and to Maria. He could still hear her laughter as she baked her famous pastries in the cafe kitchen, still see the smiles of their regular customers as they enjoyed a warm cup of coffee. He felt like a part of him had been left behind in that cafe, buried beneath the rubble, along with all the memories of a life he once loved. One morning, Carlos came to a difficult decision. Looking at the worn photo of him and Maria on the cafe's opening day, he whispered to himself, "I've become a burden to Miguel. He has his own life to live. It's time for me to go." That evening, Carlos approached his son with his request, "Miguel, I think it's time for me to move into a nursing home. I don't want to weigh you down anymore. I know you've done so much for me already." Miguel stared at his father in silence, his expression unreadable. Finally, he sighed and replied, "This weekend, I'll take you somewhere special." Carlos nodded, his heart heavy with acceptance. He began packing the few belongings he held dear: a small leather-bound notebook where Maria had written her baking recipes, a faded apron from the cafe, and a photo of the two of them standing proudly in front of Casa de Amor. As he zipped up his bag, he paused to take one last look at the room he had called home for the past few years. When the weekend arrived, Miguel helped Carlos into the car. The ride was quiet, with only the sound of the engine breaking the silence. Carlos gazed out the window, watching the city streets give way to quieter neighborhoods, and then to the open countryside. He held the photo of Maria tightly in his lap, his thoughts consumed by memories of their time together. He couldn't help but feel a pang of regret for everything he had lost: his wife, his cafe, and now his independence. As the car drove further, Carlos began to wonder where Miguel was taking him. There were no nursing homes in this direction, just stretches of green fields and clusters of small houses. But he didn't ask. Perhaps this was Miguel's way of easing the transition, taking a scenic route to give them more time together. In his heart, Carlos had resigned himself to what lay ahead. "This is the right thing," he told himself. "I don't belong in Miguel's life anymore." What Carlos didn't know, however, was that Miguel had been hiding a secret. This wasn't a trip to a nursing home. It was something far more extraordinary. Stay tuned to find out what happens next in this incredible story of love, sacrifice, and second chances. And if this story is already touching your heart, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our channel for more stories that will inspire and move you. Though Carlos had resigned himself to the thought of moving to a nursing home, the weight of loneliness was something he could never truly shake. Living with Miguel should have brought him comfort, but instead, it deepened his sense of isolation. The gap between father and son felt wider than ever, and Carlos couldn't help but think that his presence was an unwanted burden. Carlos often spent his days alone in his small room, staring at the faded photograph of himself and Maria in front of their cafe. He remembered the way her eyes sparkled with joy as they worked side by side, serving pastries and coffee to their loyal customers. The cafe wasn't just a business. It was a symbol of their love, their partnership, as the family they had built together. Now, with Maria gone and the cafe demolished, Carlos felt like he had lost not just his wife and his livelihood, but a part of himself. Every day, he replayed the same thoughts in his mind. I don't belong here anymore. Miguel has his own life, his own priorities. I'm just in the way. Carlos rarely saw Miguel during the day. His son left early for work and often returned late, exhausted from the demands of his high-stress job. When they did speak, their conversations were brief and practical. Did you eat today? Papa? Yes. Miguel? I ate. Oh, good. Teresa brought some groceries. I'll cook for you tomorrow. And then Miguel would retreat to his room, leaving Carlos alone once more. To Carlos, these interactions felt hollow, devoid of the warmth and connection he longed for. He couldn't see that Miguel's silence wasn't indifference, but exhaustion, and underneath it all, a deep love and concern for his father. Miguel, for his part, was caught in a whirlwind of responsibilities. Balancing his demanding job with caring for his father was no easy task. But what Carlos didn't know was that Miguel wasn't just working late. He was secretly planning something that he hoped would bring joy back into his father's life. Miguel often spent his evenings researching online, reaching out to old friends and customers from Casa de Amor, and even watching videos to learn how to replicate Maria's famous pastries. He kept a notebook filled with sketches and ideas for a surprise project, something that he knew would make his father feel seen, loved, and valued again. But Miguel struggled with expressing his emotions. He didn't know how to tell his father, "You're not a burden. You're my foundation." So instead, he worked in silence, hoping that his actions would speak louder than words. The distance between them wasn't born from a lack of love, but from a failure to communicate it. Carlos saw Miguel's busyness as neglect, while Miguel saw his father's quiet resignation as acceptance. Neither realized how deeply the other cared. One evening, as they sat down for dinner, Carlos finally decided to voice his feelings. "Miguel," he began, his voice hesitant, "I've been thinking, it's time for me to go to a nursing home." Miguel froze, the fork halfway to his mouth. "What are you talking about?" "Papa?" Carlos sighed, his hands trembling slightly as he placed them on the table. "I see how hard you work. You're always tired, always busy. I don't want to be a burden to you anymore. At the nursing home, I'll have people to take care of me, and you can focus on your life." Miguel set his fork down, his brows furrowing in frustration. "Papa, you're not a burden. Why would you think that?" "Because I can see it in your eyes," Carlos replied softly. "You don't have time for me. You don't need to say it, I know. And that's okay. You've done more than enough for me." Miguel leaned back in his chair, running a hand through his hair. "Papa, that's not true." He stopped himself, unsure of how to continue. How could he explain the hours he'd spent planning the surprise, the nights he'd stayed up thinking about how to bring his father's smile back? He couldn't, not yet. "Let's talk about this later," Miguel said finally. His tone clipped. "It's been a long day," Carlos nodded, his shoulders slumping. "All right. Mijo, we'll talk later." But they didn't talk later. Days turned into weeks, and the tension between them only grew. Carlos retreated further into his own world, convinced that Miguel didn't care. And Miguel, burdened by the weight of his secret project, grew more distant, afraid that his father wouldn't understand his silence. One night, as Miguel returned home late, he passed by his father's room and saw the faint glow of a lamp. He paused, peeking through the slightly open door. Carlos sat on the edge of his bed, holding a photograph of Maria and whispering to it softly. "I'm sorry. My love," Carlos murmured. "I've become a burden to him. I know this isn't what you would have wanted, but I don't know what else to do. I just want him to be happy." Miguel felt his throat tighten as he watched his father. In that moment, he saw not the man who had always seemed so strong and unshakable, but someone who was fragile, lonely, and longing for connection. He clenched his fists, determined more than ever to finish what he had started. He knew that words alone wouldn't be enough to bridge the gap between them. He had to show his father, through actions, how much he meant to him. Neither Carlos nor Miguel could fully understand the depth of each other's love and struggles. But the truth would soon be revealed in a way that neither of them could have anticipated, a way that would bring them closer than ever before. The day Carlos had been waiting for and dreading finally arrived. He believed Miguel had accepted his wish to move into a nursing home. As Miguel helped him into the car that morning, Carlos thought he was saying goodbye to his life as he knew it. But little did he know, the journey ahead would take him somewhere far beyond his expectations. Carlos sat in the passenger seat, clutching a small leather bag filled with the few belongings he held dear. Inside were pieces of his past, Maria's old recipe book, a photo of their family in front of Casa de Amor, and a faded apron he hadn't worn in years. He had packed with precision, his movements deliberate, as if this final act of preparation was his way of making peace with what was to come. The ride began in silence, the hum of the car engine filling the space between them. Carlos stared out the window, watching the familiar streets of their neighborhood pass by. He wanted to speak, to say something meaningful to his son, but the words wouldn't come. He felt his throat tighten as memories of Maria and the cafe flooded his mind. Carlos' inner monologue. This is for the best. Miguel doesn't need me holding him back anymore. I've had my time. Miguel, focused on the road ahead, glanced at his father from time to time. He could see the weight of sadness in Carlos's hunched shoulders, the way he clutched his bag like it was the only thing anchoring him to the world, after what felt like hours. They left the bustling streets of the city and entered a quieter area, where the air was fresher, and the trees stood tall on either side of the road. Carlos furrowed his brow, noticing the change in scenery. Carlos, are we going to the outskirts of town? I didn't know the nursing home was this far. Miguel with a faint smile. You'll see. Papa, just trust me. Carlos's heart sank. Miguel's tone was calm but gave away nothing. He leaned back in his seat, his hands gripping his bag tighter. He closed his eyes, letting the gentle motion of the car lull him into a state of reluctant acceptance. As they continued down the winding road, Carlos noticed the landscape change again. The dense trees gave way to a more open space, and he caught a glimpse of something familiar in the distance. Carlos thinking, no, it can't be. That's impossible. When Miguel finally turned into a small parking lot, Carlos froze. His eyes widened as he stared at the sight before him. His breath caught in his throat, and for a moment, he couldn't move. There it was, Casa de Amor, not the rubble-strewn lot he had last seen, but the cafe as it once was, or perhaps even better. The sign above the door was freshly painted, the windows gleamed in the sunlight, and the small flower boxes beneath them were bursting with vibrant blooms. At first, Carlos thought he was imagining things. How could this be? The cafe had been destroyed years ago, yet here it stood, looking as if it had been plucked straight from his memories. Miguel turned off the car engine and stepped out, walking around to open the door for his father. Carlos remained frozen in his seat, his eyes glued to the cafe. Miguel, come on. Papa, we're here. Carlos hesitated, his hands trembling as he clutched his bag. Slowly, he stepped out of the car, his knees weak beneath him. Carlos' voice shaking. What is this? Miguel, what's going on? Miguel, smiling. Welcome home. Papa. Tears welled up in Carlos's eyes as he took in the sight. Every detail was perfect. The tables and chairs on the patio, the smell of fresh coffee wafting from inside, even the familiar creak of the door as Miguel pushed it open. Miguel placed a hand on his father's shoulder, guiding him inside. Carlos's breath hitched as he stepped into the cafe. The warm, inviting atmosphere washed over him like a wave of nostalgia. It was more than a building. It was a resurrection of everything Carlos thought he had lost forever. The love, the memories, the sense of purpose, it was all here, waiting for him. Inside, Carlos was greeted by even more surprises. The walls were adorned with photographs of the old cafe, including pictures of Maria smiling behind the counter and snapshots of Carlos serving customers. The air smelled of cinnamon and vanilla, Maria's signature scents whenever she baked. Miguel led him to the counter, where a familiar item caught Carlos's eye, Maria's recipe book, now placed in a glass case with a small plaque that read, "In honor of Maria, whose love made this place a home." Carlos whispering, "Miguel, how did you do all of this?" Miguel, "I've been working on this for months. Papa, I couldn't let Casa de Amor disappear, not when it meant so much to you, to Mama, and to everyone who knew it. I wanted to give you back something you thought was gone forever." Carlos's tears finally spilled over as he embraced his son, his voice trembling with gratitude. "Carlos, you didn't have to do this." "Micho, I thought you didn't care. I thought I was just in your way." Miguel firmly, "You've never been in my way. Papa, you're the reason I am who I am today. I did this because I love you, and because I want you to see how much you're still needed." For the first time in years, Carlos felt a spark of joy and belonging. What he thought was the end of his journey turned out to be a new beginning, thanks to the love and dedication of his son. Stepping into Casa de Amor felt like stepping back into a memory. For Carlos, it wasn't just a building, it was a part of his soul, something he thought had been lost forever. But now, as he stood in the warm, inviting space, he realized this wasn't just the past resurrected, it was a new beginning. Carlos's hands trembled as he ran his fingers along the counter, the smooth surface gleaming under the soft lights. The cafe felt alive, as if Maria herself had breathed life into every corner. Carlos, softly, "Miguel, this is incredible. You brought it all back, but how?" Miguel, smiling, "I didn't do it alone. Papa, the community helped. People who remembered the cafe, neighbors, old customers, even some of Mama's friends. They all wanted to bring Casa de Amor back to life." Carlos blinked back tears as he looked around. The small details tugged at his heart, the menu board written in Maria's handwriting, the cozy chairs she had picked out herself, and the soft scent of her favorite coffee blend lingering in the air. Miguel reached into a drawer behind the counter and pulled out a small wooden box. "Miguel, I found this while we were rebuilding. It survived the fire. Somehow. I thought you might want it back." Carlos opened the box with shaking hands. Inside was Maria's wedding ring, along with a small stack of handwritten notes. He recognized them immediately, love letters she had written to him during the early days of their marriage. "Carlos, Maria always said these letters were our foundation, that no matter what happened, as long as we had love, we could rebuild anything." But that moment, surrounded by echoes of his past, Carlos felt a warmth he hadn't known in years. But what Miguel had given him wasn't just nostalgia, it was an invitation to begin again. In the days that followed, Carlos began spending every morning at the cafe. At first, he was hesitant, unsure of his place in this new version of his old life. But as the days turned into weeks, he found himself slipping back into the rhythms he once knew so well. The cafe wasn't just a physical space, it was a bridge between Carlos's past and present. And for the first time in years, he felt like he had a purpose again. Our customers started trickling in, curious about the newly reopened cafe. Some were old friends who had frequented the original Casa de Amor, and their faces lit up with recognition when they saw Carlos behind the counter. Customer, smiling, "Mr. Carlos, it's been years. I thought this place was gone forever." Carlos, beaming, "It was, but my son brought it back, and I'm glad to see you here again." As word spread, the cafe grew busier. Miguel often joined Carlos during his breaks, helping him refine the menu or practicing Maria's old recipes. One afternoon, as Carlos prepared a batch of cinnamon rolls, he noticed a young woman sitting alone at a table, staring at her coffee cup. Her expression reminded him of his own loneliness during the years he spent without Casa de Amor. Carlos, approaching gently, "Everything all right?" "Dear, you look like you've got a lot on your mind." Young woman, startled, then smiling, "I'm fine, just trying to figure some things out. This place is lovely. By the way, it feels like home." Carlos, softly, "That's exactly what it's meant to feel like. You know, My wife used to say that a good cafe isn't just about the coffee, it's about the connections we make while we're here. The woman's smile grew as she nodded. She stayed for another hour, and before she left, she thanked Carlos, saying, "I think I needed this more than I realized." In that moment, Carlos realized the cafe wasn't just about rebuilding his own life. It was about giving others a space to find comfort and belonging, just as Maria had always envisioned. One morning, as Carlos opened the cafe, he noticed a group of people gathering outside. He stepped onto the porch to see familiar faces, former employees, loyal customers, and even the delivery man who used to bring their supplies. The community hadn't just helped rebuild Casa de Amor, they had come to celebrate its return. Miguel appeared at Carlos's side, holding a large photograph of Maria and Carlos in their aprons, smiling proudly on the cafe's opening day years ago. "Miguel, we wanted to honor everything you and Mama built. This cafe is more than just a place to eat. It's a home for everyone who walks through its doors." Carlos was overcome with emotion as the crowd cheered and shared their memories of Casa de Amor. One by one, they stepped forward to thank him for the impact the cafe had on their lives. Former employee, Mr. Carlos, you gave me my first job here. You taught me how to work hard and treat people with kindness. I wouldn't be where I am today without you. Longtime customer, your cafe was where I proposed to my wife. It's been a part of our story ever since. Carlos wiped away tears, his heart swelling with gratitude. For so long, he had believed his life's work was gone, but now he saw that it had never truly left. The love and memories he had poured into Casa de Amor had stayed with the people it touched. That evening, as the cafe quieted down, Carlos and Miguel sat together at one of the tables. The soft glow of the lights reflected in their coffee cups, and the air was filled with the comforting scent of fresh pastries. "Carlos, Miguel, I don't know how to thank you. You didn't just bring back the cafe. You brought back a part of me I thought was lost forever. Miguel, you don't need to thank me. Papa, this cafe was always your dream. I just gave it a second chance." Carlos reached across the table, placing his hand over his son's. Carlos, with a smile, "You didn't just give the cafe a second chance. Micho, you gave me one. Two, and I'll make sure I don't waste it." For Carlos, Casa de Amor wasn't just a place. It was proof that love and purpose could be rebuilt, even after loss. And for Miguel, it was a way to show his father that he was never a burden, but the foundation of everything he held dear. The day finally arrived, the grand reopening of Casa de Amor. Carlos had been filled with nervous excitement for weeks, but he could never have imagined what the day would bring. It wasn't just a celebration. It was a moment that would test his courage and the love between him and his son. Carlos woke up early that morning, his hands trembling as he tied his apron around his waist. The cafe felt alive again, filled with the scent of freshly brewed coffee and the sound of laughter echoing from the kitchen. Miguel had been busy organizing every last detail, from arranging the decorations to calling old friends and family to attend. As Carlos moved behind the counter, greeting a few early arrivals, he saw familiar faces from years ago. Former employees, regular customers, and even Maria's sister had come to show their support. His heart swelled with gratitude. For so long, he had believed his life's work had disappeared into the past, but now it was clear that the cafe had never truly left the hearts of those it touched. But in the midst of the joy and celebration, Carlos couldn't shake the feeling that something was missing, or perhaps someone. Just as the ribbon-cutting ceremony was about to begin, a hush fell over the crowd. Carlos turned to see a figure standing in the doorway, his breath caught in his throat. It was Javier, his estranged brother. Carlos hadn't spoken to Javier in over 15 years. Their relationship had been shattered by a disagreement over their family's inheritance, an argument that had left deep scars on both sides. And now, here he was, standing in the cafe that Carlos and Maria had built together. The room seemed to hold its breath as the two brothers locked eyes. Javier, now older and grayer, looked uncertain, as if unsure of his welcome. Miguel stepped forward, his voice calm but firm. "Miguel, Tío Javier, I wasn't sure if you'd come, but I'm glad you're here. This place is as much a part of your story as it is ours. Carlos's heart raced. He had spent years resenting Javier for what had happened, but seeing him now, standing in the cafe they both grew up dreaming about, stirred something deeper. It wasn't anger or pain, it was longing. Carlos hesitating. Javier, why are you here? Javier softly. I came to see the cafe. To see you. I didn't think you'd want me here. But Miguel reached out. He said today was about family, about second chances. The tension in the room was palpable as Carlos struggled to find the right words. Memories of their shared childhood flashed through his mind, the two of them running through the cafe as children, helping their parents serve customers, and dreaming about the day they would take over the business together. In that moment, Carlos realized that Casa de Amor wasn't just about reconnecting with the past. It was about healing old wounds and building something new. Carlos took a deep breath and stepped forward, his voice steady but filled with emotion. Carlos, you hurt me. Javier, for years, I couldn't understand why you chose to walk away. But today isn't about the past. It's about what we do from here. Javier's eyes glistened with unshed tears as he nodded. Javier, I'm sorry, Carlos, for everything. I let my pride get in the way, and I lost so much because of it. But if there's a way to make things right, I want to try. The crowd watched as Carlos extended his hand, his voice cracking as he replied, Carlos, then let's start with today. Welcome home, hermano. The two brothers embraced, and the room erupted into applause. Miguel, standing to the side, felt a wave of relief and pride. He had hoped this moment would come, but he never imagined it would feel this powerful. With the tension lifted, the ceremony continued. Miguel handed Carlos a pair of scissors to cut the ribbon, symbolizing the cafe's new beginning. As Carlos held the scissors, he looked out at the crowd, friends, family, and even strangers who had come to celebrate. Carlos, smiling. This cafe was always about more than coffee. It was about love. And today, I feel that love more than ever. Thank you, all of you, for helping me see that the best days aren't behind us. They're still ahead. The ribbon fell, and the crowd cheered as the doors officially opened. Customers flooded in, filling the cafe with laughter and conversation. Carlos worked behind the counter, just as he had years ago, serving coffee and sharing stories. But the biggest moment of the day wasn't about the cafe itself. It was about what it had brought together: family, friends, and a chance to start over. As the evening wound down, Miguel approached Carlos with a small, wrapped box. Miguel, Papa, there's one more surprise for you. Carlos opened the box to find a framed photograph of him and Maria, standing in front of the original Casa de Amor. Beneath it was a handwritten note from Maria, something Miguel had discovered while restoring the cafe. Maria's note, Carlos, this cafe is our legacy. No matter where life takes us, know that what we built here will always bring people together. Keep its doors open, and you'll always find love waiting for you. Tears streamed down Carlos's face as he clutched the frame to his chest. Carlos, she was right. This cafe, it's not just about me or her. It's about everyone we've touched. Thank you, Miguel, for bringing it all back. Miguel wrapped an arm around his father's shoulders, his own voice thick with emotion. Miguel, you and Mama gave me everything. Papa, this is my way of giving back. As the two stood together, watching the cafe come alive with energy and laughter, Carlos felt something he hadn't felt in years: peace. Casa de Amor wasn't just a building, it was a place of healing, connection, and love. And for Carlos, it was proof that second chances weren't just possible, they were worth fighting for. As the grand reopening of Casa de Amor continued, the cafe became a beacon of love and connection. Old friends reconnected, new friendships blossomed, and Carlos found himself at the center of it all. But what touched him most were the reactions of those closest to him. After the final customer left and the cafe doors were locked, Carlos sat at a corner table, gazing out the window at the quiet street. The night was calm, with a soft breeze rustling the leaves outside. Miguel approached with 2 cups of coffee, placing one in front of his father before sitting across from him. Miguel, tired. Papa. Carlos, smiling. No, Mijo. Not tired. Just full. My heart feels full. Carlos wrapped his hands around the warm cup, letting the aroma of the coffee fill the air. Carlos, you know, when this cafe closed years ago, I thought I'd lost everything. Your mama and I built this place with so much love. And when it was gone, it felt like a part of me was gone too. Miguel, I know. Papa, that's why I wanted to bring it back. Not just for you, but for everything this cafe meant. To you, to Mama, and to everyone who walked through these doors. Carlos nodded, his eyes misty as he looked around. Every corner of the cafe held a memory, and now, those memories had found a way to live again. Carlos, I spent so many years thinking I was a burden, that my time was over. But tonight, I see how wrong I was. This cafe, this family, it's my legacy. And you, Miguel, you're my greatest legacy. Miguel looked down, his own emotions catching up with him. Miguel, I learned everything from you. Papa, you taught me how to work hard, how to care for others, and how to love without holding back. This cafe is just one way to say thank you for all of that. The following day, as Carlos walked into the cafe, he was met with a beautiful surprise. On one wall, where a blank space had remained, Miguel had hung a large collage. It was filled with handwritten notes, photographs, and messages from the community, expressions of gratitude for everything Casa de Amor had meant to them over the years. The wall became a living testament to the impact Carlos and Maria had made, a tribute to the love and kindness that had poured out of the cafe and into the lives of so many. Carlos stepped closer, his eyes scanning the messages. Note 1. This cafe gave me my first job and taught me how to believe in myself. Thank you, Mr. Carlos. Note 2. This is where I proposed to my wife. It's a place filled with love, and I'm so glad to see it open again. Note 3. Every Saturday morning, my family and I came here for breakfast. Thank you for making those moments special. Carlos turned to Miguel, his voice trembling. Carlos, you did this. Miguel, no. Papa, they did. Everyone who loves this place wanted to share how much it means to them. They wanted you to know that what you and Mama built was never forgotten. Carlos placed a hand on the wall, overwhelmed by the outpouring of love. Carlos, Maria would have loved this. She always said that kindness and love have a way of coming back to you, even when you least expect it. As Carlos was reading the messages, a familiar voice called out to him, Mr. Carlos, is that you? Carlos turned to see a young man standing near the counter, holding a small child by the hand. For a moment, he couldn't place the face, but then recognition dawned. Carlos, Antonio, is that really you? Antonio, yes. Mr. Carlos, it's been years, but I never forgot what you did for me. Antonio was one of the kids Carlos and Maria had helped when his family was struggling financially. They had given him a part-time job at the cafe, offering not just money, but a safe space where he could grow and learn. Antonio, smiling, I just wanted to say thank you. Mr. Carlos, this place, and you, changed my life. And now, I get to share it with my son. Carlos bent down to greet the little boy, who smiled shyly and waved. Carlos, softly, your papa worked hard when he was your age. I'm proud to see him doing so well. That evening, as Carlos and Miguel prepared to close the cafe, Miguel turned to his father with a thoughtful expression. Miguel, Papa, I've been thinking, what if we do more than just serve coffee and pastries? What if we make this place a home for people who need a little extra help, just like you and Mama did for Antonio? Carlos's eyes lit up with excitement. Carlos, you mean like mentoring? Giving jobs to people who need a fresh start? Miguel nodding. Exactly. We could create a scholarship fund. 2. In Mama's name. Help young people chase their dreams. Carlos's heart swelled with pride. Carlos, Maria would have loved that. And I think it's exactly what this cafe should be about. A place where love keeps growing. In every way. The weeks that followed were a whirlwind of activity and joy. Casa de Amor became more than a cafe. It became a symbol of second chances, a place where people could find hope and belonging. Carlos, now energized with a renewed sense of purpose, began mentoring young employees, sharing his wisdom, and teaching them the values that had made the cafe so beloved. Miguel managed the operations, ensuring the cafe remained sustainable while growing its impact on the community. In rebuilding Casa de Amor, Carlos and Miguel didn't just revive a cafe, they reignited a legacy of love, kindness, and connection that would last for generations. As Carlos sat on the porch of the cafe one evening, watching the sun set over the bustling street, he turned to Miguel with a smile. "Carlos, thank you, mijo, for reminding me that it's never too late to start again. This cafe, it's not just a place, it's a family." Miguel, smiling, "And you're the heart of it, Papa, always." In the end, Casa de Amor wasn't just a cafe, it was a home, a place where love lived on, and where second chances weren't just given, but celebrated. As the days turned into weeks, Casa de Amor continued to thrive, not just as a cafe, but as a symbol of love, family, and second chances. Carlos found himself filled with a renewed sense of purpose, working side by side with Miguel to ensure that the cafe remained a place of connection and joy. Every morning, Carlos would greet the customers with a warm smile, sharing stories of the cafe's history and the love that built it. Miguel, ever the devoted son, balanced running the operations while honoring the values his parents had instilled in him. Together, they created something that was more than a business. It was a legacy. The wall of gratitude in the cafe grew with each passing week. New notes were pinned up daily, sharing stories of how the cafe had impacted people's lives. For Carlos, this was a constant reminder that Casa de Amor was more than just bricks and mortar. It was a home for everyone who walked through its doors. One evening, as the cafe closed and the lights dimmed, Carlos and Miguel sat on the porch, sipping coffee under the stars. Carlos, with a peaceful smile, "You know, mijo, I used to think my time had passed, that everything I built was gone. But now, sitting here, I see it wasn't gone. It was just waiting for a second chance, just like me." Miguel, smiling, "Papa, you've always been the foundation of this family. And this cafe, everything I've done. It's because of what you and Mama taught me. Love never fades. It just finds new ways to grow." In that moment, Carlos felt truly complete. He had rediscovered not only his purpose, but also the deep bond he shared with his son. What he thought was the end of his story turned out to be the beginning of a beautiful new chapter, one filled with love, laughter, and hope for the future. As the camera pans out, the warm glow of Casa de Amor fills the frame, its lights a beacon in the quiet night. The cafe stands tall, not just as a place of business, but as a monument to everything Carlos and Miguel had built together. This is more than a story about rebuilding a cafe. It's a story about love, second chances, and the unbreakable bond between a father and his son. Casa de Amor will always stand as a reminder that it's never too late to find your purpose, reconnect with your loved ones, and create something truly meaningful. If this story touched your heart, please give it a like, share it with someone who needs a little inspiration, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more stories like this one. And we'd love to hear from you. Leave a comment below and tell us what part of this story resonated with you the most. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you next time.